Hey, Sami here. I'm not your typical job counselor. I work remote and I travel the world as I kickstart careers. This is raw, real, and on the.
Hi, I'm Sami, and this is the Career Kickstart Show. I am super excited to have Ruby Lee, founder of the Career Emporium and Tribe9. She is a career counselor and HR specialist who's worked in recruiting for Cogent, Medibank, and Wesfarmers Insurance. I'm excited to have her on the show today so she can share all about attracting HR, having your own career change, and building a meaningful side hustle. So, Ruby, I know I did a bit of an introduction, but you're going to do a better job. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Firstly, thanks so much for having me, Sami. It's awesome to be on your podcast. I'm so excited to be here. But I actually think you did a fantastic job introducing me. It's one of those things that's quite hard to do sometimes. Certainly, I think as you're introducing who you are, post corporate life or post being employed by a main employer, but just a quick wrap around who I am. So you've done really well explaining that through, but more specifically, I suppose I've been in corporate life for the better part of 10 years, working for some of Australia's largest brands, and more recently I've taken the dive in terms of bringing my side hustle to my main hustle, and it's been quite the journey so far. And I guess it's very new. I've only really gone into full-time entrepreneurship within the last 6 weeks or so I'm still very much feeling around in the dark at times, but it's been an incredible process to date.
I love that. I feel like it's so cool when I see people who figure out what they want in their career and they go for it, because I'm not someone who thinks a career is just traditionally a job. I think it's the body of work that you produce, and it's really cool where you are taking your career. And of course I'm biased because I'm all about career building myself, so whenever I see another woman just crushing it as a career coach, of course I love it. So how does it feel to be free?
It's kind of both a blessing and a curse. And I say this in the sense of I should be having a lot more time right now to be spending on building the business, building the brand, having a lot more creative thinking time. But I'm actually finding that there's a lot less time in the day because there is so much to do when you're building your own brand. And it's a lot less structured, of course, because, everything's sort of within your hands to kind of control. And it's been quite a practice for me to really hone in on. Now, 6 weeks into, going into my main hustle, I'm just starting to find the habits of success that really works for me. But in that first few 6 weeks, I was actually quite honestly a little bit lost with where to start and not having the structure of a day and meetings to get to and interviews to do. So it's been a very cool kind of process to understand what's going to work for me moving forward.
It sounds like almost like a process of de-domestication. At least that's how it felt for me when I stopped going into a day job. It was just like, oh my gosh, now I'm like a free, independent woman. What the hell do I do with my time?
Yes, exactly. And I think, because I have come through very traditional sort of corporate lines. So I went to university here in Australia, did very well, got a graduate job. And then ever since then, I've been climbing the corporate ladder for, the better part of 10 years. And because of that, I've always had a routine. You get up in the morning, you get yourself to work, you work 7.5 to 9 hours a day, then you come back and you have those like 3 hours in the evening of leisure time. Whereas now it's just, constant hustling and obviously enjoying what I do, but there's always on my mind, what do I do for the business? Or, if I have downtime, how do I best spend that downtime? Plus also balancing that with client work as well.
Yes, and it's almost like for me, when I left my job, it felt like I had all of these ideas and finally the gate was open, But instead of running in one direction, like I just like spun around for a while, just being like, oh, this looks good. Oh no, this is shiny. Oh, chat box. What are these? It does take a little bit to settle down, but you kind of have an advantage over other entrepreneurs because as a career coach, you already know about branding, professional branding. So that really does put you ahead of other people, I would say.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's very, very true. I've always been very conscious of my own personal brand. In the early days, because I was obviously representing an employer and I wanted to make sure that, you know, I was bringing in the best candidates as I was recruiting them. And then, you know, as I started to move into my side hustle, really evaluating the breakup between my employer brand versus my own personal brand and where I wanted to head. And since moving into career coaching and now coaching side hustlers, branding continues to be the number one topic that I'm approached for around, you know, how to message, how to talk to employers about side hustles. And then of course, as you're building a side hustle and attracting your tribe and your clients, how to then obviously talk about your origin story and how you can help you know, clients as they come through and move through your business. So branding's always been a hot topic.
You know, and speaking of that, I would love it if you could share a little bit on how someone can stand out to HR, to someone who is in your former position when they're applying for a job.
Absolutely. So I love this topic, by the way, because I'm very passionate about the fact that I believe resumes are coming to a very, very slow end, but there will be the death of the resume in this generation.
Hallelujah.
I know, right? So as a recruiter, typically what I would do is if I'm putting a job ad out there in the first place, I am now not solely just accepting resumes. I'm accepting websites. I'm accepting links to obviously LinkedIn profiles, any other folio work. But the number one most important thing for me is that I'm able to Google you, find you online, and have a look at what your messaging is like out there, because it is such a connected world now that if you are really, I guess, moving into a position where you're wanting to excel in your career or up-level your current career, you really should be out there doing more than just what's in your 9 to 5. We've got more platforms than ever before to share our views, share our expertise, share articles via LinkedIn. And for me, it's the personal voice that trumps experience at this point in time. So I have to say, the last couple of people that I have recruited, now keep in mind, I recruit in the technology space, specifically software engineering. A lot of the engineers that I typically hire will have websites, blogs, maybe even YouTube channels, or really cool open source accounts where they've contributed to other communities and not just, I guess, feeding into a one-dimensional look at their careers.
I love that advice because I also work quite a bit with tech professionals, especially people who've gone through tech boot camps. And that is one of the things that I have to like kind of shake into people because they don't realize that how it is in tech, that's going to be the same for most industries. You have to be able to have that brand and you have to be willing to go the extra step. A lot of people, the only time they learn how to find a job is when they're like a teenager and they're trying to get into like a restaurant job or something like that. So they only know how to go for maybe minimum wage positions. But, you know, 2018 and going on, you're going to need to bring a lot more to the table if you want something, you know, that's going to give you some sort of good work-life balance.
Absolutely. And, you know, even working right up to executive levels, I have a lot of executive clients who will say to me, I think I'm going to be made redundant, or I have been made redundant, I've been retrenched, and it's very difficult to find another job. And yet I've been in, you know, a very successful corporate career for the better part of 20 to 30 years. And now I'm at this point in time where I can't secure another role because people don't know me outside of my organization. And, you know, it's this whole kind of work that we do around personal branding, and I don't want to say it's almost too late, but if you are not considering branding and messaging now from a career point of view and what you stand for and what your why is and who you are, then you're going to be falling behind. And the only guarantee that you have to continue on with having a career that you want, that you want to thrive in, is by being able to really take control of that brand and how others perceive you.
Exactly. It's how you become recession proof. You have to think like a side hustler, like a freelancer, like an entrepreneur, because in many ways you are your product and every job is just going to be temporary in the end.
Exactly. And it's interesting you bring up the side hustle, I guess, aspect to it. And a lot of the clients I work with are side hustlers. So they're professionals having a primary source of income, actually almost loving what they do in their day jobs. But the reason why they've been propelled into thinking about creating a side hustle, or they might already have a side hustle that's monetized, is because they want to be able to have that freedom of choice. I guess traditionally I was brought up in, the early 90s. That's when, I sort of grew up, and it was still very much the thinking that you have one career. You put all of your eggs in the one basket and you get a good job and you're secure. And obviously, as we move through things like the GFC, and we've seen several, economic recessions, I think what's really happened in the last generation or so is we've really started to think about our career from almost a risk perspective, as pessimistic as it sounds, but it's almost like, how do we continue to create freedom and options for ourselves? And if it means having a side hustle and other income streams coming in and not having to rely on just the one employer, then I think that is just the ultimate freedom that you can create for yourself.
And I like that you bring up freedom in multiple revenue streams, because that is one thing that, for at least for myself, like even before I even knew what a side hustle was, like I was freelancing, I was doing that sort of like, oh, I have a little gig here, I'm doing some writing here, blah, 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 freelance, web design, whatever. And it gives you a sense of security, because even if one income stream or one job fails, you still have some other ones. And it also means that you don't have to take essentially crap. If you're like, you know what, this is not the best environment for me, I have these other things, I can rely on them until I find something that's a better fit. Too many people stay in positions where, like, they're miserable, they're sad, they don't like the environment, they don't like the people, but they just feel so dependent, and that's because that's their one income stream. And I always at least tell my clients, like, that's the no-no zone. You need to have more than one income stream so you always feel like you have some power. One thing I do want to ask is, because I've talked about this before, but I'm really curious to hear your opinion on how a side hustle can help you further build your career.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Now, I think for me, I believe that there are 3 pillars to a very successful career. The first pillar is really around financial security. So you have to pay the rent, you have to pay the bills and the mortgage. And so having that sustainable income stream is obviously going to be a massive part to having a fulfilled career. Secondly, I think it's about this whole kind of concept of intellectual stimulation, where you're constantly learning, you're constantly challenging and pushing yourself. And often this is where I find in a career, if you've been in it for more than a decade, things can get, a little bit, I guess, repetitive, or you're doing the same thing. And in Australia, we have a saying, same shit, different day, right? And that's that's the thing that, I think when you have a side hustle, you're able to kind of unlock this new learning each and every day. When I started mine, I was being a recruiter. I've never been exposed to things like coding, or I've never been exposed to things like managing my taxes, as boring as that sounds. But, I've never been exposed to things like building a website and building, funnels and, marketing for my email list. And I loved that aspect of learning how to do that. And then the third pillar is really around I think, emotional creativity, or that sense of freedom that you're able to create without any boundaries. So sometimes if you're caught in a professional role, you are obviously really guided by certain policies and procedures, and you're told what you can and can't do. Again, having a side hustle, you are your own queen of your queendom, and you kind of have this amazing free reign to just write a blog, say whatever the hell you want to say, or create a product or a service that you feel the world needs. And I think if you address those three pillars and you're in a full-time role or even a part-time role, because you're pulling all these different elements into your career, you end up having such, a much more fulfilled career as a whole, with your day job and your side hustles.
Oh, I agree so much. Thank you for sharing those pillars, because I feel like there might be some people who might listen to that and think, oh, that's not how I'm feeling. And they might want to analyze. So if you could tell me, what do you think are the signs that a person can find where they know they need a change in their career, whether that's a new job or a side hustle, or even just a transfer, to a different location in the company? Could you talk about those signs that they can look for?
Yeah, I mean, from a personal perspective, I've done a couple of career pivots myself. So when I left university, I came out with a bachelor degree in accounting and finance. And that was something that I just chose to do because I knew I was great at numbers. Within 3 years of working at one of the big 4 firms, I realized that it just was not my calling. I hated the idea of getting up each day, putting my suit on, walking into a soulless job, and I just was coming home grumpy and unhappy each and every evening. So I knew something had to change. At that point, I realized, after a bit of soul searching, I really loved working with people. And so at that point, I was like, well, what careers can help support me in working more with people? And I fell into HR, almost $50,000 pay cut to start my career again at that point. And that was a really big decision for me, because, I was at this point, I was like mid to late 20s, wanted to buy property, and all my friends were moving forward in their career, and I felt like I was starting again. But it was the best decision I'd made, because I was coming home each and every day so happy, being able to change the lives of individuals in finding them new careers and new jobs. And then I ended up spending the rest of my corporate career in HR and recruitment, as you know, Sami. And then now, more recently, switching again into owning my own business. That driver really came from, I think, going back to the 3 pillars, wanting to be more creative and expressive and having that freedom of choice to do what I love doing, I guess more openly. So the signs, I think, is always going to be from your gut. You're going to know what makes you happy. If you're coming home from work each and every evening and you're feeling depleted, your energy levels are down, and you're not yourself, you're not the best version of yourself, that's when I think you can start to critically evaluate what you feel can make you happier in your career.
I so agree, because I've experienced that myself, and people need to, understand that, like, if you spend 40 plus hours a week in a job you hate, it doesn't matter if you're doing yoga or mindset or anything like that, if you are actively suppressing the little voice inside that's screaming at you to escape, So I definitely agree so much with that. And Ruby, thank you for all of your, the answers that you've given us today. I think you've really given a really good insight into the mind of a recruiter and how somebody can really just keep evolving in their career. But before I let you go, I want to make sure that everybody can find you online and we can learn a little bit about what you are doing now, because obviously you're a mover and a shaker and things are going down.
Awesome. Well, the place and space I like to play in is certainly on LinkedIn. So do find me just at Ruby Lee. Otherwise, I do also have a growing community of side hustlers globally on Facebook. So have a look for me. I'm under the Careers Emporium Inner Circle. It's a free group, so be sure to join in. And I run a number of Facebook Lives in there every single week. And of course, check out my website, rubylee.co. And would love to hear from those of you that are thinking about starting a side hustle.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ruby, for being on the show. Everybody go check out rubylee.co. You won't regret it. And at the very least, they'll be able to see that when I was looking at headshots to do the podcast cover for this episode, you have such a cool leather jacket that you're wearing in some of your pictures. Like, I had such jacket envy. Like, if I could have reached through the screen, I would have tugged you off. And I was like, that is the best jacket. So.
Definitely an investment piece, but something that I do not regret buying with my hard-earned side hustle dollars.
I don't doubt it at all. So thank you again, everybody. This is Ruby Lee, career coach, fashion maven, and founder extraordinaire. So thank you again for being on the show, and thank you all for listening. I'm Sami Gardner, and this is the Career Kickstart Show. Evolve your career at cool.careerkickstartacademy.com.